Welcome to Popternative, where we dive into topical discussions from the worlds of pop culture, social media, and sports. Here is your host, Peter Remoliotis, aka PD Beats.
Hello and welcome to Popternative. This is the podcast and talk show where we have digital discussions, the worlds of TV, film, news, lifestyle, music, pop culture, everything really depending on the guest. We talk about it all. As always, I'm your host, Peter Remoliotis. On social media, you know me as PD Beats. And we are talking about the director's cut coming out April 2nd of a film called Mapplethorpe. We were talking to the director and writer, Ondi Timoner. Ondi, welcome to Popternative.
Thank you for having me, PDP.
PD Beats.
PD Beats. Thank you for having me, PD Beats.
I'm really excited to talk about this. Now, this film of yours came out a few years ago, but this is now the director's cut. This is something different. What can you tell us about the director's cut of Mapplethorpe?
It's the original cut. This is the cut that was going to officially premiere at Sundance in 2018 and didn't play Sundance. So it's an opportunity to see the full and complete script that I rendered. And what that means is that there's an entire decade that was cut out that's in this cut.
Yep.
And there's just elements, whether it be the Catholic Church and its impact on him from when he was a boy, to extra scenes with Patti Smith, to the original score, which is quite something to behold, and even to the death of Mapplethorpe. It's a completely different experience with the full context of this cut, which of course, being the director's cut, I prefer.
Yeah, you see, I was about to say when I asked that question, you were smiling pretty big, like you're pretty happy about this.
It's wonderful to see it be released. You know, it's a really been a long road, and I didn't know if the director's cut would ever see the light of day, but it's thanks to the fortitude and tenacity of a couple of women producers who saw this cut and thought it was really a more truthful and beautiful telling than the official release, and worked very, very hard to make this happen. So I'm very grateful to them. I'll say their names: Jamie Wolf and Geraldine Dreyfus. And then I got to go to New York and color this cut and color it to the palette that I originally envisioned. So the blues are a certain blue and the oranges are a certain orange. And, you know, we shot 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, all on Super 16 and Super 8, and also in 19 days. So we shot this movie, you know, in a record period of time, and finally now the beauty of it, the full beauty of it, is here for you. I guess April 2nd.
Absolutely. For you specifically, though, as a filmmaker, and, you know, you've been doing this for quite some time right now, Ondi, and I find it very interesting because you wear many hats on your projects. You do a lot of it. Did you kind of notice early on that you kind of had to do that if you wanted, like, a project to turn out a certain way? Like, was that always in back of your head that you wanted to kind of, like, write, direct? Like, what was that all about for you, storytelling-wise?
So necessity is the mother of invention, I suppose. And being a kid, you know, coming out of college, or really I picked up a camera when I was 19 years old, and I was a student at Yale University. And I just immediately realized, I don't know why I picked up a camera, but when I did, it was this bridge into worlds I could never otherwise enter. And suddenly I could ask people questions like you're doing with me right now. It's just so much fun.
Yeah.
And life is so much more interesting, you know? So I went into these toll booths and convenience stores as a 19-year-old kid and was like, you know, what do you think of gays in the military, and what makes you happy? And, you know, what do you fear the most? And one trucker said, women with video cameras. So my first film is called 3,000 Miles and a Woman with a Video Camera. And like, it just kind of went from there, where no one would give me any money, you know, necessarily. I made a film about women in prison for a class I was taking in college, and eventually, you know, got a little bit of money for that. But I had to produce, I had to direct, I had to edit, I had to learn how to edit, and I had to shoot. So I kind of wore all those hats naturally. And coming up in my 20s, my brother and I founded Interloper Films, and really had, you know, these really small budgets for music. This is before I made Dig, you know, EPKs and music videos with $20,000. And it's like, okay, well, we don't have the money to really hire anybody. Well, we could make something kick ass if we just actually go do it ourselves. So we just did. And that then, when the budgets got to be millions of dollars, I knew what things cost. I knew what could be done. And it's the same thing with shooting Mapplethorpe. I was producer on Mapplethorpe from the very beginning. I'm the original person who optioned the rights and got the rights from the Mapplethorpe Foundation. But on set, it's really as impossible to be producing so much as directing on those 19 days,
Yeah.
So on those 19 days, it was my editor hat and my shooting hat, shooting Super 8 right off my film chair. I would just literally sit next to my Super 8 camera. And while our great DP, Nancy Schreiber, was lighting with, a skeleton crew because we had no money, I was shooting the actors with Super 8. Or as a doc filmmaker and editor, I had the ability to know when a cut point was or what an authentic take was or I even ripped off some of my own shots from other movies, like I had Matt Smith get in the car and get the camera from Edward and drive away and not say anything and see Edward in the back. And if you've seen Dig, the last shot of Dig is Anton in the rear view.
Yep.
So, there were pages of dialogue we didn't have time to shoot right then. And I thought, oh my God, wait, I have the shot, So yeah, the wealth of experience of wearing all those hats has continued to pay off. And, I feel like it is really helpful as an independent filmmaker to be able to produce also and direct.
It's funny because I had a phase of watching a lot of like music documentaries and all the band theme stuff, and Dig was like the gateway, so to speak. That was like the first one I saw, and then like I watched tons more after that. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, that's a crazy movie.
A little bit of an understatement there.
I lived it, yeah. And if you haven't seen my movie, We Live in Public, that's equally insane. And I shot the two at the same time. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, We Live in Public predicts the internet taking over our lives. Hello.
Yeah, absolutely. Is the mindset different in terms of a documentary versus a non-documentary, like a drama or a biopic, or is it kind of just like making a movie? What's that like?
It's funny. Some journalist earlier said, so we realize that you make documentaries, but you also made this movie. And I'm like, they're all movies actually. And in fact, documentaries are harder in many ways.
Oh yeah.
In many, many ways, documentaries are harder, but scripted films are so fabulous. I mean, I just loved making this film, and there were a lot of painful moments along the way, believe me, but it was such a wonderful team effort with me and my DP, Nancy Schreiber, and Jonah Markowitz, our production designer, working as a triumvirate with them. And then, having this intimate relationship with Matt as my star, and really with all the actors. There is a lot of lines to draw between the two art forms, though. Like getting an actor to feel comfortable to inhabit that role in whatever form that takes, and to really pull out the aspects of their personality that you cast someone who is kind of like that character. Yeah. That's the best casting you can make, and to pull out that authenticity and really challenge them to go there to the depths of who they are on a day when you have all this pressure and 30 people around, is something that I think my work with people like Russell Brand, making a documentary about him for a long time and very personal documentary about him, paid off in this. When Matt would challenge me or vice versa, I would be able to kind of hit it from working with really mercurial figures like Russell.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot to Mapplethorpe, this film, the director's, and to the official release, which I also love, and which, in its own right, won tons of audience awards and other awards, and is a beloved film. But this is the complete vision of it. But there's a lot that wouldn't be if I wasn't a documentary filmmaker. I think there's a lot of authenticity and grit that you wouldn't feel in it. Even the historical reference and the archival footage that's in it. Understanding that Mapplethorpe was doing something to push the boundaries at a time that people just didn't even know. There was no LGBTQ.
Yeah.
That was not a thing.
For sure.
No trans acceptance.
No, absolutely. But that's my next question.
He himself put makeup on and did that,
Exactly. But that's my next question. The perfect segue. I mean, specifically diving into it, what are you hoping people get out of watching the director's cut of Mapplethorpe? Like when they're watching this cut of your film, right? There's a lot going on. There's gonna be a lot of emotions and everything. What specifically do you want them to take away from watching this film?
Well, I think that first of all, there's just a lot of beauty to his world. He saw beauty in S&M. He saw beauty in gay life. He saw beauty in flowers. He saw sexuality in flowers, and he saw flowers and he saw religious iconography in his most sexual work. You know, he saw things in the Catholic Church that they really didn't want him to see, but we all see, that he thought were beautiful. And that's why watching the director's cut, you can really feel a tether to that boy inside who was an altar boy and was really struggling. And his aesthetic was born of being in the church and then coming out as gay and realizing that he was not going to be accepted by the church anymore, or his father, or his priest, or Patti Smith. He was going to lose his partner. Just sweetness to Robert, even though he was a hard guy, that is in this cut, that is not necessarily as much in the other cut. I want people to relate to him, because I really want this to be an anthem for artists. I want people, and I originally set out to do that by bringing him, by showing him coming of age and coming into his art and his sexuality. I want to challenge all of us to be more of who we truly are.
Anthem for the artist. I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
No, that's great.
I want everybody to leave this thing and say, you know what? If he could do that and he had all these fatal flaws, I'm going to do that thing I was thinking about doing,
Oh, for sure.
Kind of impossible visionaries themselves,
Absolutely.
That's my motivation probably with most of my work.
So. Well, you've made many amazing films, and I'm just curious because I remember, watching an interview that Jonah Hill did when he directed his first film mid-90s, and I love the interview because they were saying, what are your takeaways? What was it like working as the first time? And he was like, after making this movie, I wrapped it and everything, I wanted to make another movie. I'm just curious, does it depend on kind of the year and the scenario for you with your films, where after you wrap a film, do you want to get back in there and make a new movie? Did you put a lot of emotions into a movie where you need to take a break? What's that? Is that case by case, Ondi?
That's so funny. I thought you were going to say you were talking to Jonah Hill, or you were watching this thing with Jonah Hill, because Jonah Hill, all over the place, he talks about Dig and We Live in Public being his favorite documentaries. And then he asked me to lunch and bowed in the restaurant, and then is going to star in an adaptation that is loosely based on We Live in Public, a documentary. So I thought you were going to ask that, but I really relate to Jonah Hill as an artist, because I have the same impetus as he does, to just go ahead and be creating all the time. It's just something that, I was really born to do. It's as much my love as any love that I have. And it's where I feel like I can make the most impact. And then of course, having made so many documentaries, I have to have something challenging, right? It either has to be a really challenging subject, or there's a new way, like my latest film about the opioid epidemic. It's like, how do I make the opioid epidemic beautiful? Yeah. How do I make people suffering from opioid addiction absolutely lovable and relatable and heroes, in their own right? Mm-hmm. And that was the challenge I took on with Coming Clean, which I hopefully succeeded at doing. And with scripted film, there's just so many challenges and just new things that I get to try and do, that I don't necessarily get the opportunity to do in making docs. So I knew one thing. I knew I wanted to make another one right away. For sure. I haven't. I've been caught up making a lot of documentaries since then. But I have been working on a script called A Stroke of Genius about my father and his life, and really his airline that he founded from scratch and having no aviation experience whatsoever, and the family that he formed, and then this accidental tragedy that happened when I was 9 that paralyzed him. And it's called A Stroke of Genius, the film. And so I've been working on that, and he actually just passed away, and I was working with him on his deathbed on it. So I have that rewrite to do, to balance with my schedule, and then hopefully get that one going. It's another 70s film, so it's another period piece that I can hopefully shoot some more film for.
We look forward to seeing that one. Wow, that's great to hear. One quick question before we wrap up. I'm just curious because, as content creators and people that make things, there's this perfectionist aspect of it that always comes, right? You want to make your movie perfect. Yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Everyone assumes, though, that perfection, changing everything all the time, will get that perfection for some reason. I played in bands all my life. changing a style of music we thought would make it better, would make it more perfect. There's obviously, though, the like when you're making these films, there's a certain aspect in your documentaries, Ondi, that you put in there, a certain feel or a little bit of like a formula that works for you. You know what I mean? That makes it kind of work for you. What do you kind of think about that whole thing? I find that interesting. Do you kind of find always the need to kind of change things all the time? Or is it kind of like, if it's working, go for it, just make the documentary? Like, what's that like for you?
Well, you know what? That's a really great question, Pete. I feel like Renoir said we all make the same film again and again and again.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's weird because my films are always like rock and roll, the internet, cult treatment centers, Russell Brand, like addiction and recovery, like, Mapplethorpe. They seem very different, but at the core of them, they really are about people taking on the impossible and kind of acting impossibly along the way.
Yeah.
So in a way, I am kind of telling that story in different arenas. And also looking at what people will give up to have their lives matter, which is basically everything.
Yeah.
We will give everything to have our lives matter. I discovered that, and we live in public. But aesthetically, I will do what the story and the subject dictate.
For sure.
I really believe that form should follow content. So it's not like me being Ondi Hitchcock and being like, here is my stamp, I shoot Super 8, for example, for most of my films, because I believe in the perfectly imperfect, gorgeous texture of Super 8. But We Live in Public was, about technology, and it was predicting the loss of privacy and intimacy and that cold electric world that we live in now, and how we would trap ourselves in these virtual boxes. There was no room for Super 8 in that, know? Every film has its different demands. 100%. And Mapplethorpe being something that was 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, it was certainly to be shot on film. And each decade to have its own palette, you know, and it's very important that the aesthetic rise somehow to the level of Mapplethorpe's work itself, or the whole film would fail. And so that was the challenge with this one. But everyone is different. So, I think it's not about me. It's about it flowing through me. I'm just conduit, and I try to be as clear a channel as possible. First, I'm a hunter-gatherer, and then I'm a sculptor. Yeah. And I just kind of like let the work speak through me if I can.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Ondi, thank you so much for coming on Popternative.
Thank you, Pete. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So director's cut, April 2nd. The director's cut's coming out April 2nd, so they're going to be able to check that out.
It'll be on Hulu too.
And on Hulu, which is amazing. And where can people follow you on social media to keep update with everything?
I'm at Ondi Timoner on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. I mean, I think that's who I am. And then also... that is me. And then also Interloper Films is my company, and we'll have more information about this happening, and Coming Clean is still in theaters if you're interested in seeing that as well. I'm not an intense poster of social media, but I will share. I do
absolutely.
Share. So,
and I'm sure you hear this a lot.
Sharing with you.
I'm sure you
hear
this.
To hear from people about what they think of the movie, and
absolutely.
Good and bad.
And I'm sure you hear this a lot, but I just want to say, Ondi, you make great movies. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Pete. I really appreciate that.
No problem. Well, this has been Popternative. I really appreciate that. This has been Popternative, youtube.com/Popternative for previous episodes. Until next time, this is Ondi Timoner and Petey Beats signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube. Be sure to like Popternative on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.